Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. We have a special guest joining us today. We have Greg Harris, the President and CEO of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, visiting us. I'll lean over and shake your hand.
Thanks for having me, Mitch. It's a thrill to come out here and see Sweetwater's corporate campus and everything that's happening here. What a vibrant, amazing place. And I came over from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this morning from Cleveland, Ohio. 3.5 hour ride.
Not too bad.
And here we are.
Yeah. So what brought you here?
We're out here doing we came to Sweetwater, quite frankly, because as a museum, we're all about preserving the history of rock and roll and the history of music. And musicians are a big part of our world.
Sure.
And of course, the instruments and the gear and everybody that uses that is a big part of our world. And the chance to see a company like Sweetwater that has really grown, has taken has serviced a ton of people and continue to grow. And quite frankly, it was impressive just to see the entire layout, to see how well organized it is, and to, as a place that's emblematic of excellence, we like seeing other organizations that are doing great.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. That's it's wonderful to have you come over and visit. There's a synergy there, definitely.
There is, and we're also out here. We have a wonderful corporate sponsor in PNC Bank, and we're out in Fort Wayne doing a special event tonight with our friends from PNC. They help us do youth education programs at the museum. They've been a wonderful supporter of the museum, and whenever we have a chance to go out to one of their markets and meet with their clients, with their friends, with people like Sweetwater, we jump at the chance, and so we're thrilled to be here.
Well, that's great. That's great. So I have to ask, how does a guy drop out of college, start a used record store, and end up the president of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
There's a few stops in between,
Right.
but the dropping out of college part may have been the easiest part of it. But no, I went to school for 2 years. I had a used record store. I owned it and operated it with a partner for about 3 years. What's wonderful for anybody that's a touring musician that's seeing this, if you're in Philadelphia, go to the Philadelphia Record Exchange. My original partner still has it 30 years later.
Nice.
It's an amazing place. So I was there. Ultimately, I ended up with a master's degree in history with an emphasis on museums. And then I worked for the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum for 14 years. A very magical place up in Cooperstown, New York. And I was called by a search firm to come out to Cleveland because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was looking for somebody that could do what I was doing. And I had that record store in my background. I'm a passionate music fan. I'm also a passionate baseball fan, but the chance to leave the baseball world, go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was just too great, and I had to do it.
Yeah, I imagine so. You were also a road manager for a while, weren't you?
I was. In that window before going back to college, actually a friend to many artists out there, a buddy named Ben Vaughn, had a wonderful band that I was the road manager for. And back then what that meant was that you drove the van, you helped with the load-in, occasionally you did a little sound mixing, and if a string broke, you changed the string.
Right. And
probably the most important part was, one, you made sure you got paid, and the other was you figured out where the band was going to sleep that night.
Right. The most important part, right? The vital thing there.
It is, and people probably can't relate to this, young people, but that was pre-cell phone. So you were calling on payphones to the next city you were playing in. You were sort of making sure it was lined up.
Right.
You were writing directions down in a big notebook. There was no GPS, there was no cell phone.
Right. Yeah, a little different time.
Yeah.
To be doing that.
And Ben's gone on to great stuff. He's produced, he was a music director for television shows like That 70s Show and Third Rock from the Sun. That's his surf guitar in there. And produced a number of records with people like Alex Chilton and Alan Vega and John Hyatt and people like that.
Right. So the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame actually dates back to about 1983, correct? Ahmet Ertegun was the original, the foundation anyway.
It does. Some real industry stalwarts. Ahmet Ertegun, Clive Davis, Jan Winter, founder of Rolling Stone magazine, they came together about 33 years ago. And they established the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was to be an honor for the best of the best. They started inducting people 31 years ago. And once the inductions were going on for a couple of years, the idea came out, we ought to have a real museum, a physical place. The inductions were terrific, but let's have a physical place. And a number of cities got into the mix. Philly wanted it because it was a home of Bandstand and some other great recording studios in Philly soul and dance music. Chicago, of course, had a great claim to it with the blues. New Orleans, arguably, really the birthplace of rock and roll. Memphis, LA, and Cleveland came to the table. they had this wonderful story because of the great DJ Alan Freed, who started playing rhythm and blues music and calling it rock and roll in the early 50s. It was also an important market. A lot of radio and musicians would break in Cleveland. If you could make it in Cleveland, you could sort of translate to either coast.
Right.
So it's not by accident that on that first Beatles tour they played Cleveland. Mm-hmm. David Bowie, his first U.S. appearance, I believe, was Cleveland. You can go down the list of a bunch of artists that were in Cleveland and had a great FM radio community,
right,
with WMMS. And so anyway, these cities all wanted it. Cleveland mobilized. They put together a way to make a strong bid for it. And the town, the corporations, the government entities, and the private citizens all came together to help fund this. And let me get my math right here. In 21 years ago, mm-hmm.
The
museum opened. And since that time, we've welcomed almost 11 million visitors.
It's amazing.
And it is an amazing spot. If anybody that's a music fan has got to come see the museum. They've got to do it. We were open 363 days a year. They can find out. We have live music at the museum many days in the summertime. Mm-hmm. People should really come and check out this museum. It's a museum that when you walk around, you realize how deeply ingrained rock and roll is into all of our lives.
Right, and how broad the genre is. I
is.
think sometimes you think of rock and roll and you think of a particular genre, but boy, it spans an incredible range of styles of music.
We like to say it's a big tent.
Right.
In saying that, rock and roll was never just four skinny guys with long hair and guitars. If you think about 1950s, you have street corner, doo-wop harmony, along with, rip-roaring, rockabilly players. In the same vein, you may have, sort of a Texas sounding, like a swing rock and roll, Johnny Burnett or something like that. And then you get into the 60s. This is the art form that counts both Simon and Garfunkel and Jimi Hendrix.
Right.
In kind of all points in between. And then you get into the 70s and 80s and you have dance music, you have hip hop music, you have heavy metal music. It's all under the same tent. Mm-hmm. We think it's all rock and roll. A big part for us is that rock and roll is an attitude. It's a spirit. It's always pushing forward. It's questioning authority. It's challenging things. And that doesn't just mean a couple people with guitars.
Sure. Now, can someone expect when I've been to the hall, but just to ask you, I guess, so for those who haven't been, is it the kind of museum where we're going to go and only see the older styles of music, or are current things shown there? How do you cover that span of all those decades?
Yeah, it's always evolving. Mm-hmm. So we always have to keep adding things to the museum to stay relevant. It's really important. At the same time, the history of it is so important and so vital. And as a Hall of Fame, we're celebrating the contributions of these artists from the very beginning. So we have to tell the broad story.
Right.
And, of course we have the roots. We've got blues, we have gospel, we have country music, and R&B as the roots. And we do have sections on, Elvis and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Little Richard and Fats Domino. But just in the same breath, we have all the LA Laurel Canyon harmony stuff. We have the San Francisco hard driving, Janis Joplin and the Dead. And you keep going. You have New York and London with the Ramones and Blondie and the Clash. And at the same time, you have all the stuff out of Sigma Studios in Philly, all the great soul stuff that came out of Memphis, that came out of Fame Studios and places like that. That's all our museum.
Right.
Everything I named was like pre-1979. From that time, we're now almost 35 years later. Mm-hmm. And we have those stories in there as well. So you get into Nirvana, but at the same time we have the Black Keys, we have Jason Isbell, we have the Alabama Shakes. They're part of the story as well, constantly evolving, constantly changing, and it's all at the museum.
Right. Clearly you're very educated about the genre. Did you come into your position at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with all that background and information, or is it something you picked up along the way since you've been there?
You know what? A bunch of it comes from just loving this. And I think everybody, when you start digging in, anybody that's playing music or into music has a deep knowledge. Mm-hmm. Hanging out at the record store for a couple of years didn't hurt.
Sure.
Pre-Spotify, that was a chance to hear anything you wanted that came through the door that day. And then I'm in a really amazing position in that every day we're coming across, the history of rock and roll. We have artists at the museum doing programs. We have concerts that we're doing special events, and you get to learn about the artists through then. This October 21st, we're going to honor Johnny Cash for his contributions through his entire career. And for that show, we're going to get a bunch of artists from different eras. And through that show, I'll learn a lot more about Cash than I've known. Last year, we honored Smokey Robinson. You learn a lot about their career when you honor somebody. We have our inductees. Every year, you learn about the inductees. So it's constant and it's fun. It's refreshing. Having said that, there's still a visitor walking through the museum today that knows more about a certain artist than any of us do, because that's their artist.
Right.
And they went deep. They know the liner notes. They know who played with who. They know what the gear was. All those really important pieces, because it means so much to them.
Sure. I think.
Who are your favorites?
Oh, a really broad range of all styles of music. But I was in high school in the '70s, so that's kind of my era, right? The heavier classic stuff, let's just say.
Great
and then
stuff.
Lots of different stuff, all kinds of, it's like you said, it's such a broad genre, and it's all good. So I try to keep my fingers in all of it where I can. I think it was important there, I was noticing as you were talking, that there's more to the hall than just exhibits that you walk past. You guys have a lot of outreach, a lot of educational things, a lot of performances. Can you talk some about that?
Be happy to, and thank you for noticing that. Yes, we're 150,000 square feet. It's a big, beautiful building right on the lakefront in Cleveland. And in that building, there's all the artifacts from all these great artists. And then there's all the visitors that have their own stories and their memories connected to the artist. So it's a magical place. That's the museum. Then we have school groups that come to the museum every day throughout the school year. There's a couple schools, and they're learning from our education staff, and they're learning math, science, social studies, history of technology, all through rock and roll. We have that program going on. We do live music events. So this summer we had 40 bands play at the museum during the day for just our visitors to enjoy. Sometimes it's on a Wednesday night, a little bit later, and you can sit outside in our beer garden, have a beer, and hear a great band on stage. So we like to do that. And the reason we do those things is it's not just the artifacts. So our mission as an organization is to engage, teach, and inspire through the power of rock and roll. And no better way to do that than with live music and with programs and activities. The other fun thing we do is when we find certain artists to come to the museum, and we do interviews in our theater with them. Yorma from Hot Tuna and Jeff Snareplane may be in showing you, his finger picking style and explaining it to you. That's one example of a program, but there could be many more examples. Could be producers, could be people that are they're songwriters. Everybody should go to rockhall.com and see what's happening at the museum. And we're very proud of those programs. We're very excited about them. And for us, it's all just part of our mission to engage, teach, and inspire through the power of rock and roll.
Sure. So much going on. Really incredible. You used an interesting word there, to me anyway. You used the word artifact. And it's hard for me to think of rock and roll gear and clothing and things as artifact, but obviously in the museum world, that's what it is. But what I'm curious about is, how does the hall acquire those artifacts? Do the artists donate those? Do they come from collectors? Do you own them? How does that all work?
It's all of the above. So our museum building will house, 5,000-6,000 artifacts. We own most of them, and others are on loan to us. The ones frequently artists themselves will donate to us, or the artist family will donate guitars, instruments, stage clothing, something to us. And it's really exciting and wonderful, because then we have it to share with the public forever. The other times we're doing an exhibit and we need something great. You need that artifact to tell that story. So right now we have an exhibit that's called Louder Than Words, Rock, Power, and Politics. It's up until Thanksgiving of 2016. So if people have a chance, you might want to see this. It tells the rock and roll and politics, and we wanted to start it with something that was really representative of rock and roll and politics. So Woodstock was one of the most important cultural moments of the 20th century. Jimi Hendrix being on stage, playing the national anthem at a time when everybody was questioning what it meant to be an American. Jimi Hendrix, a veteran of the 101st Airborne Division, on stage playing the national anthem. Well, that exhibit starts with the guitar that he played the anthem with. And it was so important to have something strong that it's on loan from a private individual, and it really is our touch point to start that exhibit.
Right. Do you have a team that searches those kinds of things out?
We do. So we're a museum, right? Our subject's rock and roll, but we have an amazing curatorial team, and that team is seeking out things for exhibits. They're also the ones that are charged with preserving the collection. So in our collection, we will treat and preserve, a Buddy Holly guitar or a pair of Elton John's shoes, like a great art museum would preserve a Van Gogh painting.
Right.
Our commitment is to preserve these forever, make sure they're in a special temperature, humidity controlled vault, make sure they're exhibited well, and make sure that we preserve them.
Right.
And the curators do that.
Right, right. That's wonderful. You have said in an interview that one of the important challenges that everyone faces, or that the hall faces, is making sure that we're not just having parents come to see the music of their youth, but that the children are coming as well, and young people are getting involved in the music. And of course, at Sweetwater, we want young people to be involved in music, and we're involved in education, all those kind of things as well. What kind of things are you doing to bring that to the younger generation?
Yeah. So when we mention this live music, we love putting up young bands of young people on stage. That's one small thing. And we are the venue for our region does a big high school rock off. And so for 5 evenings in the wintertime, 15 bands get up on stage each night, and it whittles it down to a winner. And, that's, when you do that, it's engaging the families in the region. So that piece of it's important. We talked about our education programs that go out to schools and that schools come to our place. The other thing is in the museum itself. Frequently people come as a family. And if you don't let the visitors, and especially young people, see their own story early, they're not going to be as interested. And what the curators are doing is within the museum, when we're talking about, say, we have a Bruno Mars suit on exhibit. So if a young person knows who Bruno Mars is, the way that is explained talks about how Bruno Mars was impacted and influenced by Elvis Presley, by Michael Jackson, and there's some Otis Redding, and it explains that. And the goal is to have touch points that the parents understand and grandparents, and then things that the kids understand, and have that dialogue between the two. That's really when we're at our best. And to go back to the Jimi Hendrix experience, we're not just exhibiting the static guitar. Right behind the guitar, there's footage of him on stage playing it, and you're hearing it. And things like that, I believe, resonate with all generations.
Right, absolutely. So I have to ask, one would assume that you get to rub shoulders with lots of famous people and artists. Any fun rock star stories to tell us?
We do get a lot of rock stars, of performers, others coming into the museum to visit the museum. What's interesting is they frequently want to check and see if they're on exhibit, if any of their stuff is there.
Right.
But then they quickly become fans, and they want to see the artists that they care about. They want to see the artists that they love. So when Paul Simon was in the museum, he really wanted to see the Everly Brothers stuff, because that's what influenced him when he was a young teen, and what frankly encouraged him to really go in a musical direction. So that's kind of the fun part of the job, is to see these people wake up and experience it, and they're underneath it. They got into this. They became musicians because they love music, and they want to see the things that inspire them. So that's kind of the fun part. Some of the magic that happens on the stage, that's really pretty incredible. The induction ceremony, one of the great things that the inductions do is they match sort of yesterday and today together on stage. When Dr. John, the great New Orleans piano player, was inducted, to marry yesterday and today, he played piano head-to-head with John Legend, and they just cranked it. Really incredible, and so those moments are powerful and magical, and it's very nice. It's amazing to be part of those things. On our stages, when we honored last year, we honored Smokey Robinson, and you can get this complement of great Motown artists up there to honor Smokey Robinson, and then get young artists singing Smokey Robinson songs. It's pretty special.
Yeah, no doubt. It's got to be a blast. Well, Greg, thanks so much for taking time to sit down with us here today and talk about the Hall. It's an amazing place. If you haven't been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you definitely have to check it out. It's incredible. There's something there for everybody.
You know what? If I can say the exact same thing about Sweetwater.
Oh, thank you.
Most of our staff are musicians, and they're very fond of what Sweetwater, the service that everybody here provides, and the gear that makes it their way. Seeing the campus, meeting the staff here, it's really remarkable, and I think it'd be a great tour for any music fan to swing by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and then come by your place.
There you go. Hit both locations just a few hours apart.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg.
My pleasure.
Great to see you.
Thanks.
I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.